Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to the Joe Chaffee Show on this Sunday evening at 6 o'clock. A rare Sunday for me working at my regular TV job. But once that ends in a couple of months, there's no reason why I can't live stream every Sunday and every Saturday. And usually in the wintertime I do that, and also during the peak of hurricane season, which, by the way, a week ago it was as quiet as a mouse, and right on schedule. The atmosphere just kind of woke up, and now we've got, of course, Tropical Storm Dorian, which is in strengthening mode at the moment. And we also still have that low pressure area off the Florida coast that is trying to organize. It's still rather broad. There have been some signs this afternoon, and the Hurricane Center pointed this out, that there's some organization trying to occur, but there are still some issues with that. Look, let me just set the bottom line straight through all of this with regards to the system off the East Coast and with regards to Dorian, at least through the short term from what we see. Obviously, there are no weather issues with respect to any landfalls in the U.S., whether you hear about this or see about this in other places. The main focus at the moment will be for the southern windward islands, the islands of Trinidad, the Grenadines, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and Barbados. We have a storm that hasn't even quite reached 12 degrees north latitude, so it's pretty far south, and it's about a little less than 500 miles from St. Lucia to the east-southeast, and about a little less than 400 miles east-southeast of Barbados. But starting to pick up a little bit of strength, and we're seeing evidence on the satellite. One of the things about these small tropical systems, when I say small, I mean geographically small. They only go maybe a couple of 100 miles wide, and gales are very, very tight, 50 miles or less from the center. You can oftentimes see them do strange things, which include strengthening very, very rapidly out of nowhere, and by the same token, they could also weaken very, very rapidly out of nowhere. And the general environment in that area of the tropics right now is not one of the best environments in the world with regards to strengthening. It just seems that Dorian, with its small size, is encased inside a stretch, and I'll show you on one of the other GFS maps where we can look at the shear. It seems to be encased in an area where there's at least enough moisture around. It's more moisture laden than the surrounding atmosphere a couple of 100 miles to the north, where there's a ton of dry air, and that dry air gets entrained into the circulation every once in a while. So let's get started. Just really quick, I'm going to do 2 fast, shameless self-promotions, and I'll make it quick. So for those of you who haven't done it already, download my free weather app. It's on Google Play or on the App Store. It's available for all mobile devices. Just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or just search plain old Joe Chaffee, and you should get it. And by the way, if you have an Android device, be sure your app has been updated. You'll know because it is now notification sensitive, so when you go to the local forecast page, it should take you to your local area and not default to islip, and you won't have to go in there and manually do that. Of course, take a look at the Zoom radar and some of the other features that are on there. If you have an iPhone, we have been patiently waiting Apple to put the update through, and hopefully they'll do it this week because it's been sitting on somebody's desk for 4 weeks. The other thing I wanted to mention just very fast, for those of you who are interested, you can go to my weather platform, my subscription weather platform that is on Patreon. This is just $2 a month, and I'm doing I do extra weather coverage just for Patreon members, not just during hurricane season, but during the winter and spring season as well. So you can find that. There's a link on the descriptor to this live stream or the descriptor to this video. It's it's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Okay, let's get started here. And we're going to start with, I got a close-up enhanced loop of Dorian. And one of the things that you'll notice going on this afternoon, right there, you see that dark red explosion that takes place on the enhancement. That is a significant cooling of cloud tops that is occurring. It's hard to see where the circulation center is with respect to this, but seeing these cooling cloud tops is significant because it is showing that the tropical storm is responding to a positive strengthening environment. Again, acknowledging the fact that there's dry air very close by, and we are going to see dry air get entrained in the circulation of this every so often over the next couple of days. But you start to see these darker reds here. If you look at the scale on the bottom that gives you the temperatures, you're talking about temperatures of minus 70 degrees Celsius or cooler. That is a sign that this thing is gaining some strength. And don't be shocked. Wouldn't forecast this, but don't be shocked if you wind up seeing the a rapid burst of strength in this. We had that happen a few times in smaller cyclones. I'm going to pull up the visible, which is going to run into sunset here at the end of it. But if you watch carefully, you can see these little bumps that show up. That's how it looks on the visible satellite. There you go. You see how those cloud tops are exploding there in the last few frames just as the sun is setting. So clearly some sort of strengthening is going on here, and that is perhaps going to lead to future increases in wind with regards to advisories that are coming out a little bit later on. Now here's the Hurricane Center's forecast track. And we're talking about a system at 11.5 north, 54.2 west on the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. They've upped the winds to 50 miles an hour. They're carrying a motion of west at 14 miles an hour. This is an interesting development, if only because of the fact that the further west it goes, obviously it's going to track further and further south. The Hurricane Center is actually talking about a shift more to the north down the road. Models are kind of all over the place on this. They have a general consensus, but there is some variation in there, and you've got some models emphasizing a less favorable environment once it gets into the Eastern Caribbean. So it'll be interesting to see how strong this gets before it gets to the Windward Islands. If it strengthens to a hurricane beforehand, that would probably favor a more poleward motion. So the development that's going on this afternoon needs to be looked at closely, because that might start deflecting motion a bit more toward the west-northwest. Right now, you can see in the blue area there is the islands that I mentioned, from St. Lucia, Grenadines, St. Vincent, down to Trinidad, by the way, where we have a tropical storm. I want to get this correct, so we'll pull it up from the Hurricane Center. And by the way, if you go to nhc.noaa.gov, you can access this information. So the Hurricane Center for Trinidad and for Grenada and its dependencies, Tobago, that's a tropical storm watch there. Tropical storm watch for Martinique, warnings for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and a tropical storm warning for St. Lucia. So whether we get additional islands added to this, it's moving at 280 degrees or slightly north of due west at 14 miles an hour. If we start to see it go more 285 or 290 or 295, that's important, because that might mean a threat increasing for islands a bit further to the north. It would seem, by the way, when we talk about this storm with respect to, say, Irma and Maria from a few years ago, it is tracking much further south. These islands were not impacted very much by those hurricanes, other than indirectly. So I'm sure all of the islands, given what happened with Irma and Maria and the wholesale destruction that occurred in the Leeward Islands and the Virgin Islands into Puerto Rico, that everybody is on edge. And if you notice, the Hurricane Center's forecast track does bring it relatively close to Puerto Rico, but offshore to the south, and then into the Dominican Republic as a tropical storm, coming out of the other side as a depression. But there are some models that have it on a bit further north than this, even further north than the northernmost part of this cone or envelope that you see from the Hurricane Center, taking it up over the northern islands, over Puerto Rico, and then out north of the Dominican Republic. I think the key to this is going to be what we see happen during the next 24 hours in terms of how strong it gets and whether that winds up causing a motion that's further north, a little bit more of a northward component where it starts gaining some latitude. Here's the view on the wide east, the Atlantic satellite, so you can see everything from east to west. You can see the area that's off the Florida coast, which we are going to get to a little later on. You see Dorian there getting better defined as the day wears on. Off to on the easternmost side of this, when you look out toward the African coast, one of the things that appears to be in play is some sort of strong upper low that's north of the Cabo Verde Islands. We've got a wave that's coming off the African coast that might shear it a bit as it moves westward. So I wouldn't expect anything to develop south of the Cabo Verde Islands here with the next wave. It would have to get much further to the west for anything of consequence to come out of that. So we've got one named storm, and of course, as I said, we do have the system that's off the southeast coast, which we're going to get to, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Here it is on a tighter view, so you can look on the lower right. You see Dorian coming into play here, and if you look on the upper left, you see, and notice the difference, by the way, with what an organized system looks like and what a disorganized one looks like. You notice the differences between the two. There's a whole lot more, what seems to be a whole lot more cloud cover and convection with the system that's east of the Florida coast, but you don't really have a well-defined circulation. There actually is, by the way, a low-level, some sort of circulation. You can kind of pick it out. Notice the motion of the clouds north to south off the Florida coast, and then you go out to the east with the brighter white cloud tops and the convection east of the center. You're seeing that motion being south to north. So definitely something there, but whether it consolidates and becomes a tropical depression or a tropical storm remains to be seen. But again, looking at Dorian here, front and center. Now, this map on the GFS model is pretty useful because it shows the average wind shear running at a level from about 5,000 feet up to about 30,000 feet. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm going to bring up the paint box here so we can draw a little bit. Hang on. And let me try this again. Okay. 1 second, folks. There we go. So we've got the paint box up. Now, I want to point out a couple of things here with respect to Dorian, and it's kind of on the edge of the screen. I'm going to bring it up a little bit further to the north so you can see it a bit better here. But the lines the arrow lines, okay, that actually is the wind flow at about 25,000, 28,000 feet. And one of the things that you're seeing here at this level, the wind direction at that level of the atmosphere, and this is very important because it will determine whether you have the upper air set up for something to strengthen. Dorian is right now sitting in an area of light to moderate wind shear, and more importantly is the fact that right in here, okay, there is an upper high sitting over it. Now, when you look at tropical systems, they are bottom up storms, in that the strongest part of the storm is at the bottom of the atmosphere. The weaker part is as you go higher, the winds actually get lighter. Well, and that's the reverse of a winter type, a cold core cyclone. So in a warm core cyclone, if you've got it sitting under an upper high, that creates an evacuation mechanism for all that lifting air, that moisture-laden air that is lifted up and then evacuated out at the top in the higher levels of the atmosphere. The upper high acts as the mechanism to do that. This system is sitting underneath a strong upper high. In the meantime, when we go out in the Caribbean at the moment, you don't really have a whole lot of wind shear. In fact, it's mostly confined to the area that's down near the coast of South America. You also have some stronger upper air winds to the west, but these are strong southwesterly winds coming out of that high, so that helps create that evacuation area that I just referred to. Now, going forward with Dorian, at least into tomorrow night, we are going to see conditions that I think are going to be favorable for this to strengthen or at least maintain its strength. That upper high remains intact as it moves over the islands, and in fact, you've got a fairly large area of light wind of light winds in the upper atmosphere. Very little wind shear here through early Tuesday morning. You do have stronger winds, west-southwest winds across the northeast Caribbean up to about Puerto Rico. So the question is, does Dorian then move into that area of shear? You notice that from this position where we have this strong upper high, as Dorian goes into the Caribbean and starts turning more northwestward, the upper high starts to weaken, and you've got the impact now of this shear that is going on that essentially, at least according to the GFS and the European, the storm does lose its identity and gets ripped apart. That's something that happens with systems when they get into the Eastern Caribbean, because there's almost an area of what I would call semi-permanent shear that's there. So it's not often that you see that shear area relax. Sometimes it does. There have been many cases of storms that have moved into the northeastern Caribbean or the Eastern Caribbean, and they move in at a time where conditions are favorable for at least to maintain strength and not get ripped apart. Whether this is one of those times remains to be seen. And again, there are differences in the models. If you wind up with a track that's further to the north, perhaps it would mean that the shear impacts will be less. Hard to say if that plays out that way, but this is going to be one of the critical questions once it gets into the Eastern Caribbean, because if the shear doesn't take it apart, then it could mean that you might be dealing with something a bit more important when it comes to heading, if it heads more northwest and moves closer to Puerto Rico. So it's almost pointless, I guess, to really speculate beyond that, because we really don't know how much is going to be left. What if there's nothing left? And it is quite possible that it could get sheared apart in the long range and you won't see anything left when it's all said and done. By the way, thanks to Tropical Tidbits and Levi Cowan's great site. He's got if you're really into the tropical meteorology, folks, he's got a great video up there that you can take a look at, and he's been posting video updates of all of this and getting into the crux of the weather, the super details and the technicals. This is the hurricane. These are the hurricane track models, and they're all clustered over the southern part of the islands. You can see the blue, the two blue models that are shown here. One of them is a UK. I believe one of them is. I don't know if that's at the UK Met. I do know that the UK Met is trying to take a track further to the north. So that has raised a few eyebrows, as the UK Met sometimes does hit home runs with these sorts of things. But you see where the outlier tracks are 60 or 70 miles further north than the ones where they're clustered, but it's important because that could make a huge difference taking something over Puerto Rico as opposed to south of Puerto Rico. And also remember, these islands have mountainous terrain. A lot of them have mountainous terrain high enough that it can certainly distort circulations and cause some weakening, particularly Puerto Rico and especially the island of Hispaniola in the Dominican Republic, where the elevations go up several thousand feet or higher, and it's certainly they have in the past have done they have disrupted and weakened tropical systems as they move over those islands. So we're going to keep an eye on that. That's for the longer term, for the middle part of next week or a little bit later. first things first will be to see what happens after it goes across the southern windwards, and what do we have, what are we dealing with when we get the system into the eastern Caribbean. All right, well, I'm going to just, we'll lose this for now. I'm going to bring up the storm, system off the east coast, 98L, and we're going to take a look at this. So here's the model track guidance with this, and one of the things we'll have to look at if it does develop is that you do have a cluster of models taking this over Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Now, it may not necessarily develop into a tropical depression, a tropical storm, or a subtropical storm. We'll have to wait and see. Clearly, since Friday, not much has happened. So, past experience suggests that many times when systems look like they're going to develop and you've got conditions that are conducive and they don't respond, many times you wind up staying that way through the whole life cycle of whatever disturbed weather you're dealing with. But also we have cases where suddenly it gets up north of 35 degrees north and it gets into a good spot and you got the right conditions and you suddenly have a tropical storm there. So here's how it looks on the close-up loop. Again, there is a broad low here. It's analyzed on the surface map, and you've got convection on the east side, but you can see there is a gap between that and then some convection that's off the Florida coast going northeast. There's a burst of thunderstorms going on there. So we'll have to wait to see some thunderstorms develop near where the circulation center is. I'm sure Miami's certainly looking at this very, very closely. You've got clouds going northeastward here, and the upper flow is not really supportive of something to come up the east coast. Take a look at the clouds that are over Georgia and on up through Tennessee and in western North Carolina. Those higher clouds, which way are they moving? They're going west to east. So the upper air steering winds here are going to act as a protective wall to keep anything that develops off the southeast coast from moving northward. It's going to gain some latitude, but it's also going to lose longitude as it moves north and east. Okay, so it's only going to be able to get so far north before it goes northeastward anyhow. We are at the moment really not concerned with where this, with regards to any land impacts to the southeast or the mid-Atlantic or to the northeast. The models would suggest if you see where the clouds are going that are offshore, you see them running up toward Nova Scotia, you have to wonder whether if something does come out of here that it moves right along this boundary. Certainly the satellite would suggest with what's in front of us that yes, indeed, that could happen. And in the meantime, you can see some of these other clouds that are moving from east to west, responding to the low-level flow and the big high that's up in the Gulf of Maine, pushing those clouds westward to the coast. It didn't stop much of my area from having a nice day that was no worse than partly sunny, with temperatures in the low to mid-70s and wonderfully low dew points. We like that. We support that. And would that we could keep that, have more days like that in the summer months than the ones where we're dealing with the superheat and the superhumidity. Here's the surface map of the system that's off the southeast coast. This is the 2 o'clock plot. And over the last couple of days, we've been dealing with a surface low that has been sitting over Florida itself. But during this morning, a new low has formed. And in fact, you can see that it has been analyzed here off the east coast of Florida, roughly at about 30 north, and I would say at about 77 west. And if you look at the wind barbs, you can also see that we do have, there's a north-northeast wind at this particular point, this buoy that's out east of Daytona. And then you go northeast of there onto this other buoy that's got the 80-74 and the 140 there with the pressure. It's got a southeast wind there. So there's some kind of broad circulation. And then take a look at the wind that's sitting right on the stationary boundary off the South Carolina, Georgia coast, where you see 79-70. You have winds there that are north-northeast at about 15-20. and then you've got a north-northeast wind at a buoy off the Georgia coast that's got a wind at about 15, 20 knots. So definitely seeing some kind of broad low here. Whether we can see thunderstorms consolidate around the center or not, that's the big if. And here again on the tracks, it doesn't matter because of the fact that the models all kind of line up with what you saw on the satellite in terms of the motion, that it'll be pretty much southwest to northeast over the next 4 or 5 days. So if as far as Nova Scotia and Newfoundland are concerned, let's see if we wind up getting something that develops before we start worrying about any kind of impact here, because it may just wind up staying a broad low all the way up with no serious impact to our weather at all. All right, so from here, let's go back, and I'm gonna set up the GFS to take a look at. We'll go back to Dorian, and we may have enough of the new GFS to see if there's any change on this. So here's the surface when we look down in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean and areas off the South Atlantic coast. You can see Dorian on the lower right. You can see the broad low east of the Georgia, South Carolina coastline. You can see how small it is, by the way, in terms of Dorian. And don't focus too much on what it shows as a pressure. Just kind of follow the identifying feature there that moves over the southern islands, and then it's gone. It's just about gone. It just holds a set. By the time we get to the middle of the day, Wednesday, it's just an open wave, and it's very hard to find. Can't even pick up an identity much beyond the Dominican Republic. It just disappears. So the GFS certainly suggests on its new run, and we can look at that shear map again. Back we go. So there's Dorian on the lower right, comes over the islands, and then suddenly you get the impact of the wind shear, and goodbye. There's an upper low here in eastern Cuba and over Haiti. And that upper low is going to be responsible, if this is correct, in producing strong winds aloft. Look at here. This is Wednesday evening. You've got a belt of very, very strong winds in the upper atmosphere over the Dominican Republic. And again, this is something that often happens in the eastern half of the Caribbean Sea. Usually conditions are much more favorable for development of these systems when they get into the western Caribbean. Meanwhile, the system in the southeast is sitting in an area of light upper air winds. It doesn't have the greatest looking upper high in the world. Even though it does have light wind shear and there is a bit of an upper high in there, you don't have the strongest evacuation. The setup of the high is tilted sort of northeast southwest, which is not ideal. And it's hard to even pick out an identifying feature with regards to a surface low. We'll go to the surface map and see what it does with this. And again, on the GFS, you can see it keeps it very, very broad off the east coast as it moves northward. It never really gets anything going here. Now, I'm not sure why it's doing this, but there's a wrapped up low that the model keeps making. I didn't really give this a close look, but it does develop some kind of low off well east of New Jersey, south of Cape Cod tomorrow afternoon, which it lifts northward and northwestward into Nova Scotia as a 995 low with the isobars fairly tight. I apologize for those of you watching from southeastern Canada. I really didn't give it a good look today in terms of why it keeps doing that. I want to take a look and see if the European does the same. But as far as the low that's off the southeast coast, it doesn't really ever get it going as a wrapped up low. That doesn't mean, by the way, that it's going to be right. Oftentimes, it used to be once upon a time that the global models that we used years ago were not very, very bad at dealing with tropical storms. They weren't really designed for them. We went from that to the opposite extreme over the last number of years, where we've gotten used to these models spinning up everything that moves and making these obnoxious Category 5 hurricanes that didn't exist. I don't know whether the recent upgrades have overcorrected for that, and it's the reason why we're not seeing them. We're seeing very little of that this particular season, but nonetheless, we'll just. This is where you sit down, you kind of watch the radar, watch the satellite, and let that tell you what's going forward. I just want to switch to the European really quick. European's not that different in terms of doing the same thing, at least from earlier today. And the European earlier, back during the week, was creating a wrapped up low. It doesn't quite, at least with that first low, it just takes it northeastward and passes it east of Nova Scotia. It's not doing what the GFS is doing. The European does a bit more with the low off the southeast coast as it takes it northeastward than the GFS does. But again, these models, you have got one of them wrapping up a low up well to the north of the low that we're focused on, and the other model doing pretty much the opposite, where it's not wrapping it up. So bottom line is, we'll watch and wait and see. And the other bottom line is, again, for the east coast of the U.S., this is not an issue, and never really was an issue given the upper air flow. And with respect to the upper air flow, taking a look at that, you've got an upper low over Nova Scotia, a stronger upper low in northern Minnesota with its trough. That's going to swing through here later this week with two cold fronts, one on Wednesday and a weak one, and one on Friday, also a weak one, which is going to take us into the Labor Day holiday weekend, which right now is looking very good for the Northeast, and I'm thinking maybe down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. The jet stream on Labor Day all the way down into North Carolina, so that should at least allow for a decent push of dry and hopefully certainly cool air. Hopefully every bit as cool as what we saw this weekend here in the Northeast. We can take a look at the dew points to give us a clue, and I'll roll it back. And by the way, we're not going to really see the humidity come up much until Tuesday, later Tuesday. You start to see the dew points rise up in Virginia and North Carolina into the low 60s, but nothing crazy. And going into Tuesday night, you're still seeing 50s dew points in northern New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania, and low 60s in southern Pennsylvania down into southern New Jersey. So this dry air actually is getting reinforced by the system that is up over Nova Scotia, and it gives us a couple of extra days of decent humidity. Now, ahead of Wednesday's cold front, dew points get up into the 60s. There might be a shower or thunderstorm when that front passes. Here comes another shot of lower humidity, not quite as low as what we've seen, but certainly comfortable. 50s dew points for Thursday and Friday. A brief push up into the 60s when that second front comes through late Friday night, early Saturday morning. And now for the Labor Day weekend, you've got Saturday and Sunday dew points in the 40s and 50s, and even Monday dew points are still in the 50s to around 60. So I'm optimistic that we're going to have a relatively quiet week this week in the eastern part of the U.S., and we're going to see two more shots of dry air coming down from the north. Big high in the Gulf of Maine builds back westward into New England and overhead, so we continue to stay dry. There's your next cold front into the Great Lakes on Monday night. Probably some severe weather for areas from Chicago south and west down to St. Louis. The GFS certainly picks that out with the cold front. And then as it moves eastward, kind of loses its punch because of the fact that we're not saturating back to tropical dew points in the 70s here. So the atmosphere is going to have much less to work on as that front moves eastward. And the model's not really doing very much with it. High for Thursday and Friday, next cold front for Saturday with another nice size high that goes down into the Great Lakes and on up into eastern Canada for Saturday and Sunday. You got northeast winds, onshore flow, yes, but I think dry enough. And the frontal boundary is going to be pretty far to the south. Even areas down in the Carolinas not showing a whole lot with respect to showers and thunderstorms here. I'll put the radar view of this, and look how minimal it is on next weekend. And we'll backtrack just to show you what the GFS and its view with showers and storms for early this week. Now, these that you're seeing here for Monday, that's that very warm, humid air coming up on the backside of the high in the east. These are the showers and storms for the cold front Monday night into Tuesday. Then Tuesday night into Wednesday, not a whole lot going on there. And when we go into late Wednesday, you've got a front approaching. I'm not really overly enthused about the prospects for severe weather here, particularly because of the fact you still have that low offshore. And again, we're not going to dew points that are soaring up into the 70s here. We're going to be getting dew points back up into the 60s for a brief period of time. And then that's gone. Thursday and Friday look quiet. Second front for Friday night, Saturday. Hardly find anything with it. It's through here by early Saturday morning. And then in comes the big high for the rest of the weekend. At least that's the game plan that we have on the table. Oftentimes those game plans don't exactly play out that way, the way you'd like. But right now we are optimistic with respect to this coming week. Much of the time it's going to be fine. Threat for storms maybe on Wednesday, and not much with that second front. Just to show you the upper air flow that we have. And again, we've been talking about the fact that we keep getting these short waves moving through with the southern part of the jet stream pretty active. The lagging trough in the east that's over us today strengthens over Nova Scotia. Another strong trough drops into the plains and Midwest, just enough for us in the east to participate in some drier air. And you still have westerly winds. You have winds blowing from Montana to Iowa to Kentucky to Virginia, and then east out into the Atlantic. And yet another trough coming down as we head into the first 4 or 5 days of the month of September. So no real change in the upper pattern. You still have ridging going on up in the North Atlantic, up over Greenland. That has been something we've seen all summer long. And you wonder how long that's going to last. I was noticing one of the retired forecasters from the Philadelphia office likes to look at the Nino, La Nina, the NAO, and the patterns that we see in the summertime, along with a few other things with regards to the winter. One of the things he points out is that we've had a number of these seasons where the NAO is very active and present during the summertime, and then during the winter months, you don't see a sign of it. The NAO being the North Atlantic Oscillation, which is something where you have, it's a phenomena of higher pressures up in the North Atlantic and up toward Greenland, which suppresses the jet stream further south, and can certainly mean colder than average temperatures in the eastern part of the United States, along with opportunities for snow, which I know the snow lovers like to hear. I get more. I know it's the end of August when I see folks already posting questions regarding the winter. Okay, too early. All right. Let's just do a little bit of current weather with the U.S. satellite tonight, and then I'm going to come over to the chat board and join you. You can see the cloud cover offshore and across the middle and south, the southern parts of the Mid-Atlantic and into the southeast. A little bit of action there in South Florida. We've got some showers and storms. There actually was a low that formed in the northwestern Gulf of Mexico yesterday from disturbed weather that was there late last week. But it was so close to land that it just didn't have an opportunity to strengthen. If it had been further south and had more time, perhaps we could have seen a tropical depression or a tropical storm out of it. But it was so close to land that instead all you got was the rain to move northward. And you're seeing action going all the way up into the plains. Very, very dry in the west, the western half of the United States, particularly west of the Rockies, enjoying some very nice summertime weather. WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, the ladies and gentlemen there who put out this forecast and often do a pretty good job. You'll notice dry for the coastal plain from Maine down into Virginia and North Carolina. Then you start to see rains along and offshore on the order of 2 to 3 inches over the next 7 days. Over Florida, a bit on the busy side, and down along the Gulf states. through Oklahoma and Kansas and Missouri, northeastward up to about Chicago. Of course, that's all going to be thunderstorm driven. So look for some variation in rainfall amounts, some heavier rains up in northern Minnesota. And again, from the Rockies west, we're seeing very little in the way of activity. Severe weather tonight, and for those of you where this is impacting you, remember you're watching this right now at 6:40 Eastern Time. So if you're watching this on a replay, you're going to want to check your local National Weather Service office for any watches or warnings by going to weather.gov. And we've got slight risk in North and South Dakota, where we have a working severe thunderstorm watch. Marginal risks go a little further southeast and west around that slight risk area. Otherwise, it's very quiet in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states, and very, very quiet out in the west. All right, so here we go. I'm going to get you guys get on the chat board here. I really hope everybody had an opportunity to enjoy the beautiful weather in my neck of the woods anyway, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. And if you had beautiful weather where you are and you were outside of that zone I just mentioned, I hope you had the opportunity to enjoy yourselves. It's days like this just don't happen very often, and you got to take advantage. Tim Pendleton, a.k.a. Iron Mind, one of our regulars. Thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really, really appreciate it greatly. Anthony Orr, one of our two resident statisticians. Of course, we have Scott Briller, as we know him also as the chairman. He points out that the last time the Atlantic had no named storms between July 15th and August 24th with winds of 45 miles an hour or more was in 1982. As a reminder, Dorian was up to 50 today, 8:25 at 5 o'clock. Ben McInnes from southeastern Canada, from Nova Scotia, if I remember correctly. Thanks, welcome back. You haven't been on in a while. I hope everything is well by you. I wonder what that low will do that comes before Invest 98. That's a good question on that, Ben, because you have the GFS really wrapping that low up, and the European not. And I wonder whether the GFS might be keying on the wrong low. On the other hand, the GFS is doing more with the upper feature that is off the New England coast, and perhaps the model is responding to that by developing that wave east of the New Jersey coast during the day tomorrow. It'll be fascinating to see if it happens. It certainly will have an impact on your weather if it does. So we'll of course watch it very, very closely. AS, thank you very much. How is my cabinet hiding cat? AS, my cabinet hiding cat is no longer with us. He died. It'll be 2 years now. It was very quick. He died 2 years ago on around Christmas time, and he had diabetes. I lost my dog right after Thanksgiving. Well, he was 14 and he was just gone. Deaf, blind, senile. So we did the right thing by him. He was 14 years old, my Springer Spaniel, beautiful, wonderful dog, and a lot of great memories with him. Yes, for those of you who don't know what he means by my cabinet-loving, my cabinet-hiding cat, my cat had this knack. First of all, he was more like a dog than anything else, because he grew up with my dog. And he had an uncanny knack of knowing whenever I was doing a live stream, because he would jump on the table and walk in front of the camera while I was doing it. And those of you who go back with me a couple of years ago know that all too well. But he would go in my kitchen while I was on the air, and he would climb up, stretch his hind legs, and he was a very big cat and a very large cat. He looked. I used to call him a mountain lion. But he would reach up to the top cabinet where we would have a box with vitamins and things, and he would pull the box out and it would go crashing onto the floor right while I was doing the live stream. Miss him terribly, because he was about as sweet a cat as you could ever imagine. He's the only cat I ever knew that loved having his belly scratched. Most cats don't like that. He loved it. So thanks for reminding me. He brings a It brings back nothing but good memories of both. And yes, it was exciting, Izzy when he came running. Hey, good to see you, by the way. Hope you had a good weekend, too. Springer Spaniels are great dogs, AS. I agree. They're very, very smart. They have a character about them that's a little odd, but they are extremely smart dogs and can be very quirky. I had my Springer Spaniel. I would always hear stories about my friends' dogs who were afraid of thunderstorms. My dog used to run toward them. Okay, he would see lightning and hear the thunder. He would run toward the storms and bark at them as if to say, "You don't belong here. Okay, you need to go someplace else. This is my territory, not yours. You need to leave." And he had no fear of going outside during a thunderstorm. I wouldn't let him go, but he always wanted to go because he just would want to bark at the thunderstorms. Christopher Alley, yes, this looks like a very good week for Long Island. If you just mind the interruption for late Wednesday into Wednesday night, the weather's going to be fine on Long Island this week. If you pick this as a vacation week, either to come to Long Island or just to spend it on the local beaches, if you are a local, you picked very well, because I think the weather this week will be fine. A little bit cooler at the start for the first half, a little bit warmer for the second half, and the Labor Day weekend could be very well like this weekend was in terms of temperatures and in terms of sky conditions. Julianne Steele, that piece on the end of Nova Scotia that looks like a baseball glove, that's Cape Breton, where you live in the Kraken, Sydney. Yes, and of course we had those storms back months ago that produced some pretty horrific conditions in terms of wind and rain and damage up in Nova Scotia, particularly in Newfoundland, as I recall. So you're certainly not strangers to big storms, and in fact, you get storms that are even far stronger than what we deal with here in the Northeast. So I would just kind of keep an eye on things with regards to what's happening there with the frontal boundary, and certainly I will be doing that as we go through tonight and then during and then tomorrow. Donna Levasseur, it was just nice to give the air conditioner a rest and open the windows. I'll say it was great, actually. I slept with the windows open the last couple of nights and plan to do the same for tonight. All right, so I think Jason Schaefer, nice to see you. I saw you jumped on earlier, which probably means you might have left earlier. Lisa Wadsworth, is anyone up to date on all the quakes happening? I did read a few stories about earthquakes going on in parts of the plains in Kansas and in Oklahoma. It's been particularly active there. I haven't seen anything in the news the last couple of days, but I did see it earlier during this week. So I'll keep a watch to see if there's any stories. I'm not sure what's going on. Don't pay too much attention to that part of the. I look at the meteorology. I don't necessarily look at the geology going on. What goes on in the earthquake world. Nova Scotia and Halifax for Ben McInnes. Absolutely, I do remember. This takes a while sometimes, Ben, for the 60-year-old brain to kick in. But it's really nice to see you on here. Weather woke up because you keep talking about it. Yeah, I guess. They listen to me. It's kind of funny. I tease about the fact, I kid about the fact that, and Anthony Orr will vouch on this, how I will put up a post or do a live stream with regards to what's going on with SPC or the Hurricane Center, and I'll set something up, I'll write about it, I'll talk about it, and then as soon as I'm done, it's as if they wait for me to finish my whatever I'm doing to go, and then they take it to the next level. The SPC will raise the risk area. The Hurricane Center will upgrade a system from a wave to a depression to a tropical storm. They did that to me yesterday with Dorian, and it's hard for me. I don't want to get ahead of them necessarily. There are times when I certainly will see things going on, and I don't want to say, well, they need to do this or they need to do that. They have their job and I have my job, and I don't step on their toes. I'm a great believer in supporting what the Weather Service does, especially SPC and the Hurricane Center, because I think both places do great jobs, and the Weather Prediction Center, WPC, I think does with certain things with their rain forecasts, especially. They do an absolutely fantastic job, and they're very, very helpful for me because they help me see things that I might miss. So we love what they do, and they do not only do they do a great job, but they always do the best that they can do, and that's the most important thing. Izzy, my 60-year-old brain is faster than your 22-year-old brain. I don't know. I'm not. I don't remember things, and I'm not as sharp as I used to be. But I keep doing what I'm doing, and it helps. It helps. When I'm having trouble, if I'm having a tough time completing sentences, because I do get like that. Every once in a while, trying to grasp for that word that used to come to me so easily, and it doesn't always do that. Anthony Orr, the statistical models and the dynamical models are showing different outcomes with Tropical Storm Dorian. Which group of models are more correct, in my opinion? That's a really good question, Anthony. There are times where one works, and then it keeps working till it doesn't, and there are times when the other one works. There are times that the dynamical ones work, the global models will work, and then other times that the statistical models will take the upper hand. Statistical models would suggest that Dorian will weaken when it goes into the Eastern Caribbean, and it actually does have support by some of the global models. So, but not all of them. So the key for me is really going to be what it does between now and then, and what do we wind up dealing with after it crosses the islands and heads over into the Eastern Caribbean. Okay, I think we can call this a night. Had a pretty good live stream. We're 52 minutes into it. Thanks for being here, as always. Really appreciate it. We had a nice crowd here for a Sunday night. Especially on a day where everybody was running around enjoying the nice weather in my neck of the woods. So if you happen to be watching from the islands, and I know when we had these tropical systems back in the last few years, I do get folks that watch from the islands. You're more than welcome to send me messages or questions on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and I can help address them. And of course, we will be following this storm as it moves westward over the next couple of days, and so don't hesitate at all. We will also have additional coverage going on my subscription weather platform on Patreon, which is just $2 a month. And for those of you who are on it, a lot of you are on this chat, and I know you guys always tell me how much you enjoy it, and I'm really happy to hear that. But if you are interested, the link is up there on the chat. It's also up on the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video. Izzy D, as far as a library appearance is concerned, I still don't have anything on the books, but if you get to your local library and see if we can work something out. I'm going to have a lot more free time to do library appearances, so for those of you who are in the area in northern New Jersey, the northern half of New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, New York City, Long Island, Southwest Connecticut. If you'd like me to come and give a talk to your local library, let them know and have them get in touch with me, and we will see if we can work something out. Patreon members, thanks for reminding me, Izzy. Yes, Weather in 10. I'll probably try and do one tomorrow. My schedule is a little bit tight, but yes, Weather. Patreon members get they get an extra video during the day. It's Weather in 10, so I try to get it all done inside of 10 minutes. Weather in 5 will be tomorrow morning, and that's 5 days in 5 minutes. And today it wound up being 10 because of the tropical system, so we'll try to get it all in 5 minutes so you can get the bottom line and get on with your day. And of course, we'll be back here tomorrow night with our regular live stream. Yeah, let's shoot for 7 o'clock Eastern time for tomorrow. And in the meantime, you can check out my website, meteorologistjoechaffee.com, or download my free weather app on the App Store or on Google Play by just searching Meteorologist Joe Chaffee or just plain old Joe Chaffee. Okay? Shameless self-promotions are all done for the day. Thank you very much, Kim Pendleton, a.k.a. Iron Mind 10, for hitting Super Chat tonight. That's a cigar for the drive home for me, and we will see you tomorrow.